Absolutely delighted that we have so many people joining us today. You'll notice that your camera and indeed your microphone are turned off. And so we do encourage you to interact with this session using the chat function. This includes asking questions in the chat you'd like to put forward for the Q&A session that will take place towards the end of the event. So thank you for all of that, and we'll now be delighted to commence the recording and get things formally going. So a very formal welcome from me, Barry Fisher. I'm absolutely thrilled to be the Chief Executive of the environmental charity Keep Scotland Beautiful. And I'm really thrilled, genuinely thrilled to be chairing this event. And I'd like to wish you a very warm welcome, what has been, as I say, quite a big week for weather, for our second in our series of national conversations. Keep Scotland Beautiful is your charity for inspiring action on the environment, and we have four main objectives, which are in combating climate change, tackling litter and waste, restoring nature and biodiversity, and improving places. Our first national conversation was held during Scotland's Climate Week back in September last year and covered the topic climate action in sport, and it was a fantastic session. And if you haven't had the opportunity to look at it, I would really urge you to look at our website and listen to the discussions that we had here. It really was a fantastic event. But I'm thrilled that also today we are joined online by volunteers, local authority staff, businesses, and trustees of our own charity, demonstrating that huge, wide interest there is in tackling one of our most widespread environmental issues. As a charity, we declared a litter emergency in 2022 based on evidence we collected from our surveys and audits, and importantly from public perceptions also. Our two latest reports, How Clean Are Our Streets and the Scottish Litter Survey, published in November 2023, continue to evidence the challenge. 90% of people agree that litter is a problem in Scotland, the highest figure we've had in 3 years. 75% of sites being littered, while 1 in 10 were observed to have significant presence adversely affecting the cleanliness of the area. Worryingly, almost two-fifths of people believe that litter in general has become more common in the area in the past year. The perception is more pronounced in the least affluent neighbourhoods, a figure backed up by our own ground litter data, which highlights that litter levels are more significant in the least affluent areas. Furthermore, 27% of sites recorded a presence of litter that would be recoverable under a deposit return, and 40% of sites recorded litter covered under current extended producer responsibility EPR regulations, and indeed the proposals for ground litter. We could get really depressed about these stats shown here, and many of us, including I'm sure most of you who are joining us today, are genuinely frustrated. But positively, 85% of people agree that they want to see more efforts to prevent litter in their area, and 82% expressed a desire for increased action to clean up litter locally. We know that there are thousands of people out there who tackling litter in lots of different ways, and all of them really care. And I think today will really highlight, a real innovative ways and inspirational ways, and people are doing it. And all of us, of course, want to see a litter-free Scotland and a more circular economy. We're supporting the Scottish Government's marine litter strategy. Our upstream battle week of action is in full swing this week, although it's been slightly interrupted by the high winds, unfortunately. We were supposed to be doing some events here in Aberdeen, but for obvious reasons, the weather has curtailed that. But we'll continue to support activity in that area. And we're also a key partner in delivering key sections of the 2023-2024 action plan for the litter and fly tipping strategy for Scotland, which was launched last year. We know that the need for positive and imminent change across all areas, from innovative behaviour change interventions to bin provision and servicing, to enforcement and the speedy introduction of policies which we urgently need to ensure our country has a more circular economy. We can't keep saying that there is a problem. We need to ensure we reverse the trend with consistent collective action. So on today's event, a conversation about tackling litter across the country. And we will hear from panellists today about the work that they're doing, and we'll also provide the opportunity to ask questions through the chat function throughout the event. If you have any issues with this, in terms of getting your questions across that you don't think in the chat function, please do email cleanup@keepscotlandbeautiful.org. You can see that the hashtag for this event is hashtag tackling litter on the screen, and we'd be delighted if you could please share your attendance at this event and through your own social media feeds. As part of our efforts to tackle litter and waste, we've been delighted to work with various organisations, businesses, communities and individuals. We want to continue to support and inspire action to tackle the litter emergency across the country ahead of our annual Spring Clean event or campaign, which engages thousands of people picking up litter from the places that they care most about. So once again, thank you for joining us and taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us. Our panelists, as I say, have inspired us throughout the year, and we hope that they will really inspire you again today. And I'm absolutely thrilled that TV broadcaster Sean Batty has joined us to provide an opening keynote address. And following that, we will also hear from panellists Mike Scotland, who's an environmental ambassador, Ryan Wood, a store manager with Decathlon, Louise Hastie, who's director of Low Impact Living, and we'll also hear from Laura Young, an environmental campaigner and ethical influencer. I'll be joined by three of these speakers later for the Q&A session. So once again, please do use the chat function to submit your questions. We will do, of course, as much as we can to answer many questions as we can, but I hope you'll understand we may need to group some of those questions into similar themes to cover as much ground as we can today. But if you didn't feel that your questions have been answered, we will try and respond to all the questions throughout the day and respond back to you by email. So that's enough from me, and without further ado, we're going to hear from our keynote speaker, Sean, who's kindly agreed to be the opening address for us today. We've been delighted in the past year to support Sean, providing interviewees and connecting to his research team to some of the communities we work with who are tackling litter across Scotland as part of his programme, Sean Scotland. After studying meteorology at Reading University, Sean started working at the Met Office as a weather observer in the south of England before moving into broadcast meteorology at ITV. At ITV, Sean worked behind the scenes preparing broadcasts, and then at the BBC, where he was given his first opportunity to present radio and television. At the BBC, Sean presented at most of the English regions and at some point also Wales and Northern Ireland. So quite an impressive coverage there, Sean. He joined the STV team in 2007 as the first weather presenter for the channel in 10 years. Over the last 15 years, STV he's brought in the new year, taking part in many charity challenges for the STV Children's Appeal, and has many other several spin-off shows, one of which is Sean Scotland. Sean, you've had an incredibly busy time, but we're thrilled that you're here. So thank you for being with us.
Thanks for that, Barry. Yes, I mean, as you say, I've kind of been all over the place with work, and it's certainly been all over the place in the last week, given the bad weather we've had. Last week I was in Ullapool for the cold, the snow, the blizzards, the drifting snow. And then this week, of course, we've just been battered by storm after storm, Storm Isha. And then tonight we've got another storm on the way, Jocelyn, which hopefully not going to be quite as bad as Isha, but still it's kept me busy. Now, I've been at STV now for about 16 years. And in that time, I've been lucky enough to travel around the country, mainly initially for weather. And I absolutely love being out in most weather elements, apart from rain. But I do love being out and about in it. But of course, as you just mentioned there, Sean Scotland, which is a programme that I've been involved with now for a couple of years. We've had programmes where I travel around. I've travelled from the very far north of Scotland right down to the borders in Dumfries and Galway. And generally, a lot of what we do in those programmes is look at ecotourism, the environment, However, last year, as you were mentioning here, Barry, I did get to go out with some of the volunteers and meet them, see the hard work that was being done, because STB had its very first ever STB Green Week. We're hoping that we'll have another one this year, and that's where the channel focuses on green issues, environment, and also a focus as well on climate change. So during that programme, I was able to get out and about in Scotland and see, as I say, the hard work that has been getting done. So during Green Week, the very special Sean Scotland SOS, we called it. And I should say, if you want to watch that, you can still get it on the STV player. Got to get the plug in there. But you can watch Sean Scotland SOS. And in that programme, you will see the volunteers taking part in those cleanups. During that week, I spent some time with the water witch. Those of you that are watching near Glasgow might know the water witch. It's that strange yellow boat that goes up and down the Clyde with a crane on it, and it takes large pieces of litter out of the Clyde. But we follow the journey on the Sean Scotland SOS from the Clyde right up to places like Lochoil Head and also Aricher, because whilst the water witch is picking out large pieces of plastic and litter from the Clyde, the smaller pieces end up inevitably coming down the drains, especially during weather like we've got today, the heavy downpours. Take the litter into the drains, that heads into the Clyde, and then inevitably ends up washed up in places like Lochoil Head and Aricher. Now, I remember stopping off for an ice cream many years ago in Aricher, and we were having an ice cream. We walked over to the loch and suddenly just realised the absolute mess there is on the beach there, the amount of plastic that's on the beach, rubbish. And at the time, I didn't realise that Aricher is known as a litter sink. So anything that's in the Clyde, because the way the tides, the waves work, it all ends up in these areas. But of course, it's one of the beauty spots in Scotland. Many visitors that come to Scotland, potentially if they're going up the west coast, will probably stop there, of course, after they've stopped in Luss for some ice cream there. They might stop in Aricher and they see the massive litter issue that there is there. And they might think, like myself at the time, why is Aricher doing nothing about it? But it isn't their issue, really. It is their issue because that's where the litter ends up. But of course, it comes from further downriver, in Glasgow, for example, in places like Renfrewshire and Inverclyde, and ends up washed up there. What was really upsetting when I was there as well is the fact that when I'm talking about plastic, yes, you've got bigger parts, bigger pieces of plastic, but there's also those tiny, tiny microscopic pieces of plastic, the microplastics. And these obviously are a massive issue. In Aricher, you've got lots of little ducks there that are bobbing around, and you know they're pecking around in the water. They're wading in amongst the litter. They're pecking around in amongst the litter and inevitably ingesting some of that small plastic. Which is, it's really horrible to see because, well, you know that's it's obviously not great for them. But part of that programme, as I say, that is, I mean, that's just one part of Scotland. This is happening all over the country. But what was great to see was I went out with the Friends of Dumbarton Foreshore. I went out on a litter pick in the Gorbals and also a pick-up in Aricher too. And I realised that this is all volunteers that are giving up their time, coming along to do these litter picks, and many of them join for very different reasons. You know, I spoke to people that were just really angry about the litter issue we've got. They're passionate about Scotland and, you know, the scenery we've got. You look up, we've got amazing scenery, but you look down at your feet and there's lots of litter. There were people who were living on their own, perhaps had lost a partner, but joined these groups to be part of a community and to make friends. And what was also an eye-opener was they were all from very different backgrounds and all different ages as well. There was older people there was younger people there, and there was a real camaraderie as well. So hopefully people that take part in litter picks are going to make new friends as well as help pick up some of the litter and potentially come up with new ideas. I see there's lots of comments coming in at the moment, ideas as well that some groups have of capturing that litter. So as I say, that programme looked at a lot of that. For myself, you know, when it comes to sustainability, obviously I do all the programming. I also did a programme a few years ago called Don't Waste Scotland, where I showed off some of my what I do in my spare time. Obviously, my big passion is weather. But in my spare time, I like making furniture. I've made benches, I've made dining tables, picnic benches. I've even made a bar for our local village hall. And I make all of this using wood that I get from a Glasgow wood recycling yard. I use scaffold boards, whiskey barrel staves. And, you know, I just love when you can get an old scaffold board, which has got a story of, you know, it's been a scaffold board most of its life. And then you sand it down and you know, you can get it looking beautiful and put it up and make a shelf out of it. And there's just, I love doing that because there's nothing better than taking a really grotty, horrible piece of wood that would have potentially ended up in landfill to then make it into a nice piece of furniture that we can have in our house. And it's great to see that that's always quite trendy at the moment as well too. Another thing as well is I'm heading off to London tomorrow because I'm hoping to make some weather educational toys in the future. And one issue that I have actually found is that getting things made in the UK is actually extremely expensive. And actually, there's very few places that manufacture things in the UK where we need to get a lot made in China. It gets shipped over here. You've got the carbon footprint. But what I'm trying to do is when I come to making these toys, hopefully in the next couple of years, is that they will be made sustainably from recycled wood or recycled plastics. But it is a difficult thing. But you know, it's great to see that so many people have joined up to take part in the litter picks, because it's only with your hard work that we're going to be able to really clean Scotland up. There's an awful lot of litter still out there. I was really surprised because there's a lot of times you go around and you think, well, you know, it's actually quite a clean country. But it's not once you actually start looking. And as I say, Arica for me was a huge eye opener of the big issue we have. And as I say, it is only because of the many people that are willing to give up their time to take part in these litter picks that Scotland can become a better place. So thank you very much for doing that. And I realise that there might be some questions that come in. Hopefully Barry will get a chance to answer them at some point.
Sean, thank you for joining us. I know you're genuinely, literally about to dive off to do something. So we're incredibly grateful that you joined us. But also, you know, your passion for the subject is absolutely clear. And you know, I know our team love working with you, and that's because your passion for it is so obvious. I think it's really interesting that you mentioned that the kind of the added benefits, if you will, or of something like a litter pick in terms of how people interacting with each other can actually be really meaningful, which I think actually provides us with a great introduction to our next guest, Mike Scotland. Mike has founded Man Up, Speak Up and Community Cleanup, and he's passionate also about improving mental health and environmental awareness. Mike is an environmental brand ambassador for Helping Hand Environment and has shown amazing dedication to tackling Scotland's litter emergency and encouraging others to do the same. Mike is going to focus on the recycling of negative personal energy to global positive power through his own litter picking journey and detail how it has inspired others to take action in and around their own areas and communities. Mike, I've been following your social media feeds for a long time, so I'm really looking forward to hearing from you. Mike, hi. I'm going to just break in, Mike. I can hear some of it. Unfortunately, it's not as clear for others. So I think what we'll do is, can we come back to you, Mike, if that's okay? And see if we can get a better clear, just because I know it's such a powerful story, Mike. I'm just really keen that it comes through loud and clear. So what we'll do, I think, so Mike, if you just see if you can work on the technical side, perhaps introduce Ryan at this point. It's really important, I think, to hear from Ryan today. Ryan is store manager with Decathlon and does so much work and has been such a friend and a real inspiration to us at Keep Scotland Beautiful. So Ryan, if you're able to leap in at this moment, that'd be great.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Barry. Hopefully everybody can hear me loud and clear. So yeah, as Barry mentioned, I work for Decathlon, and our main focus right now is to make sport accessible to the many. In 2021, we changed this philosophy to make sport sustainably accessible. So we have the philosophy to protect our playground. So we know that if there's no snow, then we can't go skiing. If all the locks are full of litter, then nobody wants to go stand up paddleboarding, or nobody wants to go swimming. So we've made a massive push in terms of this, both massively worldwide. So we have a huge World Cleanup Day event every year. Last year, there were 750 events that were hosted by Decathlon worldwide. That was over 30,000 people. In Scotland, we've joined up with Keep Scotland Beautiful to host our own spring clean events, working with local partners, local sports clubs, to really tackle the issue. It was a real big hit for me. I recently was injured playing my own sport, and I spent 6 months on the sideline, and I would notice the amount of litter that was on the side of football pitches, on the side of rugby pitches, and how this is a major issue. And these are areas where we should be inspiring young kids and young families to get involved in a more physical and healthier background. And this isn't happening because we're not providing the right environment. So we decided to team up with Keep Scotland Beautiful and work close with the guys there. So we've really kind of pushed on events in our stores. We've pushed on working with the local community. We've become a local hub as well. So we provide free cleanup equipment. We also take that equipment away, and we work with a local provider to make sure it all gets recycled. In terms of our own progress in store, we as a company have tried to make sure that we are reducing the amount of waste that we produce. So for example, if you ever come into our store, the main question we get asked is, why is there no packaging for our products? So if you buy a pair of shoes off the shelf, there's no box, there's no plastic wrapping. Part of this is because we need to reduce that amount, because that's what ends up in landfills, it's what ends up in, unfortunately, in public places, and it's the issue as a whole. So we're very much trying to push on the idea that sport can be a big impact, and corporate companies should have a massive responsibility in helping to tackle this issue as well. We are part of the problem, unfortunately, as most other companies, so we need to be part of the solution. I think part of that is that we will continue to grow the work that we do in terms of the amount of events. We're currently trying to work with our other Scottish stores to become more local hubs and to push that element across, and to try and improve our own sustainable practices. So we are improving our offer that we give to our customers in terms of rental, buyback. So we take bikes back in to the store now. So instead of these end up in landfill or in skips, as we've noticed when we've done events with Keep Scotland Beautiful, particularly recently, that if you go to, we did the Firth and Forth Canal, there was a lot of bikes that we pulled out of the water. That's an issue that we are part of, so we want to be part of the solution. That's kind of our work going forward. As a store team, we're also trying to be really including the community as well. So we make sure that we, when we have team meetings, that at least one of these a month is set, so we go around our local store and we litter pick. So we've recently we're having some work done to our building, and we know that can create issues as well. So part of that is how we improve and how we change going forward. And I think that's a big thing corporate-wise, and I imagine quite a lot of people in the chat will have questions in regards to how companies work with groups and what responsibilities companies have. I can't answer for most companies, but I do think we need to have a bigger impact on the positive outcomes that we can have sustainably. I think that's one of the biggest challenges going forward, and something that we need to improve. Yeah, I'll let Barry jump back in now.
Brian, thanks for that. I mean, it's really interesting to hear what an organisation like Decathlon is doing, but also it's really important to highlight your personal engagement in this, and I know I've seen that up close. I'm delighted to say I think that we're going to try again with Mike. Mike, if you're back, we'll see if we can. Apologies for stopping you mid-flow, but hopefully we'll be able to hear your story now, which is such an inspiration.
Testing. Is this working? Okay, yeah, let's go for round 2 with this one. Yeah, definitely a struggle with somebody that's got anxiety. So this is proof of the pudding right here. But apologies on before. But yeah, Mike Scotland. I'm wearing this T-shirt today, as I flagged up, with mental health. Hopefully you can all see this, and I wear it with pride. And for me personally, it goes hand in hand with litter picking. And when it comes to litter picking itself, I believe you have to make it relatable and personal. Exactly what it is for me. I don't believe that the old-fashioned approach of don't litter, don't do this, and you've got to do that. I find that very off-putting And I think that the amount of litter it's out there in the world and the amount of people we should be empowering people to do the right thing instead of giving them into trouble for doing the wrong thing. And obviously, by following that kind of suit going forward, we'll have more positive people, and the minority of the people that's dropping should come down drastically. For me, litter picking is very much a personal drive, and it does relate back to mental health. Back in 2019, I was in a very dark place, mentally facing some challenges, and I found myself one day in an area that was used as a dumping ground for decades, and I wanted to remove myself from this world. Thankfully, it was a phone call that stopped me from doing that. I then spent the next few months building myself back up. However, every time I walked past that place that I wanted to end things, I couldn't help but notice the amount of litter that was there. It's something that I'd walked past for many years, but making it personal towards me, it was like a dark shadow, and it was something that I had to do something about. And one day, I took a few black bags and decided to start to pick up some litter. And when I was doing that, I was stopped by a person, a passerby on a bike called Massimo De Bella, and he asked me what I was doing. And it was very awkward because one, I'd never really done a litter pick before, and two, I've got social anxiety, so I struggle engaging with other people. But I told him I was litter picking. He then got off his bike and he decided to give me a hand. And for the next 2 hours, me and this complete stranger picking up litter together and having the most unbelievable conversations about the most random things, conversations that I'd never had with friends or family before. And I said to him that day, just after we'd finished clearing 3 full back bags, I'm going to start a group called Community Cleanup, and it's going to go global. And I stand by that. And fast forward on 4 years, that's exactly what's happened. I decided to run a litter picking event following on from that first litter pick, and it only got 10 people along, 6 people, sorry. But on that day, we litter picked for 2 hours and cleaned over 300 kilograms from the riverside in Aberdeen. The following weekend, we done the same event, but this time 10 people showed up and we done 600 kilograms. Now, we done that every weekend for months, and as a result, we've moved 13,000 kilograms of rubbish from a riverside. We cleaned up 2,500 kilograms of metal out of the River Don, bringing otters to swim upstream for the first time in 40 years. And we basically took an area of Aberdeen, which was used as a dumping ground for decades, and we turned into a nature trail. Now, I'm extremely proud of that, but I'm also extremely proud of each and every single person that got involved with that, because this is what litter picking is for me. You take something negative and you turn it into something positive. And that brings so much empowerment from each and every person that chooses to get involved. So rather than saying, oh, this litter is extremely bad, that area looks horrible, it's quite off-putting. You don't really want to get involved. However, if you say, I'm going to take that on as a challenge and I'm going to do something positive about it, does anyone want to join me? You're almost empowering people to get involved for the right reasons. Now, what them reasons are, everybody has their own why, is what Sean said. And I think that basically goes hand in hand for what I try and push, is that everyone has their own reason why. And I think to find that reason why, you need to interact with them. Now, as negative as litter is, because it is literally every single place in the world, you can use it into a positive movement to meet new people, to find new connections, to find new friends. And you get that self-satisfaction by taking something that is negative and doing something about it and turn it into a positive. And I think that's one of the big things and keys that I want to bring today, is that don't wait for somebody else to do it. Take that pride within yourself and use it to empower yourself and inspire others. And for me, tying it back into the mental health side, I struggle with social anxiety. I have severe anxiety from different situations, frustration, sometimes anger. So what I do is, anytime I feel those emotions, and whenever I can, I take my litter picker, I take a black bag and my handy hoop, and I go out for a walk. And I put all my negativity into each and every single item of litter I find. I put it into my bin bag, and instantly I feel that weight come off my shoulders, that pressure come off my chest, because I know that I'm doing something positive with that energy. Because at the end of the day, all these emotions and feelings that each and every person have, they won't go away by themselves, and neither will litter. We recently had a hell of a lot of snow across the country, and that snow melts away itself and it goes away itself, but the litter will always remain there unless people do something about it. And just that weekend past, we had Scotland's biggest cleanup event up in Aberdeen, and I got asked the question of, how do you get people involved with this? And I think I don't really ask them to get involved. I just show them what they can do. And I think sometimes that's the case when it comes to litter picking. People sometimes fear that they they need to get approval or they need to get permission to do these sort of things. But in another thing they said after the event itself was, when's the next event? And it's like, the next event is whenever you want it to be. The next time you see litter, that is your next event. And it's taken that personal empowerment and personal approach to empower all the people out there, not just in Scotland, the UK, but in the world, that they can make a difference. They just need to learn to how. And again, I think I want to just summarize this to, when it comes to litter, you need to make it personal and you need to make it relatable. And for me, that would be the key to getting the message out there to each and every person in the world is, there's a difference here to be made. You're the one that can make it.
Mike, amazing. And I'm just so glad we got you back to tell that story, because it is incredibly powerful. And I feel the same, that sense of, what difference will it make? And it's beyond litter. And that's the exciting thing, where people take action, so much more can flow from that. So Mike, I'm so glad we got you. And I'm so glad you're here on this call today to share that story with us. So I really appreciate that. And I can't believe we're now in the same city. And I thought we were going to meet up this morning at the Upstream Battle event, but sadly it was cancelled, but hopefully we'll meet soon in person. We now welcome Louise Hastie. Louise is the co-founder of social enterprise LIL, which stands for Lower Impact Living. LIL connects, inspires and empowers community to deliver positive outcomes for people and planet. And just for the sake of time, Louise, I'm just going to hand straight over to you.
Thanks so much, Barry. I'm really disappointed Mike's mic wasn't working earlier, so that I have to follow that. That was awesome. Thank you so much, Mike. We at LIL, it stands for Lower Impact Living, and it was born out of the plastic pollution problem, intricately linked with litter and climate change emergencies. And we feel that those problems are so linked that our solutions need to be as well. At LIL, we run litter picks. I'm just still buzzing from listening to Mike and those conversations that you get. One of the last ones we did was a silent disco litter pick, which was really fun, but it did limit the conversation. So we ended up turning it on and off as we went around and depending where we were. We've done litter picks on beaches in towns, and we do have done ones on our local river where we get a partner with the Beyond Boundaries East Lothian and All Abilities paddling and cycling organisation, and we go on the river and pick up litter there too. So to start off a Keep Scotland Beautiful conversation, I have a confession to make, and that is that I litter. Last week, I realised I'd not seen my warm bobble hat since a beach walk in October, which pretty much means that has definitely ended up in the ocean somewhere then. On Monday night, we had the worst of the storms here then. We had a tree come down in our garden and our bin blew over. I think I got it all back in, but I can't be sure. And I've been reading the comments with interest. I know there's lots of really passionate community litter pickers all here. We're all part of wanting to be part of the solution. But I think even with the best intentions, many of us are also, unfortunately, part of that problem. Even when we do our very best about it. So I think that we're facing a problem now where every minute a lorry load of plastic goes into the sea. That's the same sea that gives us up to 2/3 of the oxygen we breathe. It's a huge, huge problem, and we're going to need to have a multifaceted attack in the way that we deal with it as well. I know we've been talking about the upstream battle, and people have been talking about behaviour change and different things on the chat, and that's exactly what we think is really important too. We need to be litter picking. We need to be collecting that data so we know what litter picking is most important, but we also need to turn that litter off at the tap. And there is a lot that individually we can do. The landscape changes do make the biggest difference. So it used to be that plastic bags and cotton buds were the most prevalent things that we'd find in beach cleans. That legislation change has reduced that massively, but that doesn't come about in a silo. That comes because we're all adding our voices to call for that change. So that is really important. But there's a lot that you can do individually, and you can encourage your communities to do. I saw there was a research piece about reusable coffee cups. That's still one of the most prevalent things we find in beach cleans. Just make a rule, encourage others. If you haven't got your own cup, you go in for a cup of coffee. Reuse your drink bottle. I was going to say my other top tip was just don't smoke, but I know we've got Laura coming too to talk about vapes, and that I hate picking up cigarette butts. They're my one I really detest. But also it's to limit our packaging wherever we can. It was lovely to hear Ryan talking about that at Decathlon. Recognise that the recycling blows out of bins as much as our landfill bins do, and that we're also, I think many of us, I know I'm a sucker for the wish cycling, which is when we put things in recycling in the hope that it will be recycled. It might be that it's of a material that can't be recycled. Plastics are something like 9 times at best they can be recycled. It could be contamination, but there's a lot of things that end up in our recycling that either through the wind or through the product won't get there. It's also worth noting how much the litter emergency and climate emergency go hand in hand, and how much of it comes down to individuals. I've heard that the kitchen is the new frontier of climate change, which I quite like. 80% of Scotland's carbon footprint comes from the goods and services we buy, and 91% of litter found comes from the general public. So it's choosing less packaging, choosing where we do have those choices to make. It's so important that we try and make them the positive ones as much as we can, and to look at that. At Lil, one way that we really focus on reducing our waste is to promote secondhand. There's a stat that keeping just 1 kilo of clothes in circulation can save up to 25 kilos of carbon. So we host fashion swaps, jumble sales. We have a free coat rail at our local library at the moment. That becomes a free school uniform swap in the summer. We need to try and make secondhand our first choice wherever we can to do that, because we know that fast fashion, well, not a common feature on the beach cleans other than my bobble hat, is one of the most polluting industries in the world. The litter we can't see in microplastics that we were talking about earlier has found its way in the Antarctic and in placenta. It's really everywhere, and we're going to have to try and stop that from entering into the stream as much as we can. So thank you so much, guys. Oh, we've got a comment there that it doesn't come from the general public, it comes from the manufacturers. I love that, but I think as well that the manufacturers have a responsibility to their shareholders, so that they need to return the best investment. So if more of the public don't buy from the worst manufacturers, we can still make a difference in that way. I'll give it back to you now, Barry, I promise.
Louise, thank you. And, you know, again, really inspirational insights there into the work that you're doing. And I really do hope that your hat turns up somewhere. No beaches in East Lothian quite well. I hope they do at some point. We're having a great session, but time is against us. But I'm absolutely delighted that Laura has provided a pre-record for us. I think she's on a train coming back from London or somewhere. But Laura, many of you will know from the work that she has done, and we've been delighted to particularly work with her on the issue of single-use vapes. So we're just going to hand over to her presentation now.
Hi, my name is Laura Young, also known as Less Waste Laura, and it's my absolute joy to join you to talk about disposable vapes and the campaign that I've been doing. I only have 5 minutes, so this is going to be the biggest whistle-stop tour of how we went from a problem, primarily as litter, to then discovering all the different issues with these devices. Very quickly, what is a disposable vape? Well, it's a throwaway electronic device that really has surged into popularity in the last couple of years since around 2019. It is marketed as disposable and it's hard to know what's inside of it, but this graphic is a really great example to show all the different materials. It is plastics, metals, rubber, sponges, different types of liquids, and of course there is a large lithium ion battery. So inside this there are many different components. And vapes were developed in 2003 to be a smoking cessation device made primarily in China. But of course, we now know that there has been a real rise in vaping and youth vaping in particular, which is something that is quite worrying from the non-smoking population. But in 5 minutes, I can hardly talk just about the environmental stuff, but I definitely won't be able to cover any public health things. But I wanted to definitely highlight that that is a huge part of this campaign and the issue. There are several worrying environmental factors when it comes to disposable vapes, and I would like to go through them all one by one if that is okay. The first is that there is a huge amount of waste associated with them. In 2023, just last year, Material Focus did research looking at the UK, how many disposable vapes were thrown away every single week, and it is 5 million. 5 million disposable vapes are thrown away every single week in the UK. And that is 5 million devices with really precious materials that we are losing if those go to landfill or are incinerated. So we are talking about a huge number. And this number has also quadrupled since the research was done in 2022. So this problem is growing exponentially and it is becoming one of the biggest waste streams. We are seeing the beginning of what I like to call fast tech, similar to fast fashion, but this is with electronic devices. So waste is a huge part of it. But litter is another massive part, and this is where at the end of 2022, I personally came across this issue, finding these as litter in my local area, especially out with my dog, who I was really worried about when he found one in a bush. They are not just bad because they are litter, but they are also a really damaging type of litter. They have all of those mixed materials. When they are run over by a car or trodden on or in the environment for a long time, they can break up, they can release microplastics, and of course they have electronic device parts inside of them. So when that stuff leaches into the environment, it is a really, really big problem. And one of those photographs is from the V&A's plastic exhibition, which was up in Dundee last year. And actually some of the primary schools around Scotland went on beach cleans, and that was on display as part of the exhibition, and there was some vapes in it. So it's definitely something that is not just a road or streets problem or in our local parks, it's even getting to the beach. And as I said, it's not just a regular piece of litter, it can be very damaging. And this is actually a garage owner in Dundee who did a piece with the local paper, The Courier, showing that he's getting regular customers in who have run over vapes, in their car, and it has popped holes in the tires. And you can see the photograph on the left is one type of vape that's just at different stages of breaking down, all that I've found across Dundee, and then even the photo in the middle of a vape that has pierced through a tyre. So a really significant problem, not just because it's litter, but because it's very dangerous to litter. And we've also seen wildlife photographers taking photos of the fact that animals are now picking these up. This is a seabird that picked it up thinking it was a razor shell with a fish inside of it. So we know that big harm to humans, animals, wildlife, nature, and a big piece of waste. Another problem is that recycling is not easy or efficient. A lot of people say, why are you campaigning for a ban? Well, it's because it's the best option out there. We carefully looked at all the different options. We, meaning the campaign, the people who are involved in this, the organisations. And there was a lot that was wrong with recycling or trying to push that. Number one is we're not very good at recycling. We don't have a good track record. So it's really hard to say that that is something we should promote when we're not very good at it. Also, vapes are not 100% recyclable. It would be wrong to say that. There's many parts of it that will end up needing to go to landfill or incineration. Vape points are also not accessible. They should be really at all retailers, but we know that many are failing to comply with the UK legislation on this, and it's something that's really difficult. They need to be manually pulled apart. And this is very labour intensive, time intensive, and so it's something that is really difficult. Another thing is they are a major fire hazard. Lithium batteries, when damaged, can cause catastrophic fires, and we've seen over 700 fires happening in the last year due to lithium batteries in vapes. And we even had in Angus, a council here in Scotland, had to offload 8 tonnes of recycling waste after it caught fire in the lorry to discover that a vape battery had exploded after being damaged. So this is putting our waste workers at risk. We also know that it just doesn't fit with the circular economy. It is the linear economy. It is the perfect example of take, make and dispose. We have created a single-use disposable electronic, something that never should have existed. And when we are pursuing a circular economy, these should not exist. And actually, what came first was circular vapes, things that you recharge and refill. And so definitely the disposables need to go. We've had great support for the campaign. It's been very grassroots. We've got many organisations who are involved in this, people like Keep Scotland Beautiful, the Marine Conservation Society, and Ash Scotland, Public Health Scotland, lots of health organisations, and many more. There are too many to name. But we've also had 29 out of 32 Scottish councils come out and fully support a ban and write to the Scottish Government to say that that's what they want. And of course, we've had the Scottish Government themselves who have published a report on this, and alongside the UK Government, after a big consultation last year, are looking at what to do about this. And we've had the Scottish Youth Parliament also support this. We do know that there's lots of greenwashing from the industry, and that's something that we have to look out for. And there was a great complaint that was upheld against Elfbar, one of the biggest brands of disposable vapes, and it's great to see that that happened. So we know that greenwashing is something that the industry is trying to do, trying to trick us into thinking that these are green, that these are sustainable, that they're easy to recycle. And so we need to make sure that we are calling that out. The industry is not really wanting to work towards sustainability. It is making it harder and harder for us to get to that circular economy. So we always have to have that in mind. But that was a very quick, and I'm sure I'm over time, so apologies, but I wanted to cram everything in to this really short amount of time. But I wanted to prove that this was actually a tweet that I put out in September 2022 when I first found my first disposable vape as a piece of litter. And just from putting that out there, gathering with other individuals and organisations who were interested, and of course pushing and building this campaign, we have got all the way down to Westminster, Holyrood. We've been across all major media channels. We've got millions of views on things that we've put out on social media. So it is possible to go from being annoyed about an issue to creating a campaign, to building momentum, and to even getting parliamentary change. Hopefully it will be a ban that is implemented, but regardless of what the outcome is, we know that there will be politicians and the government looking at how to deal with the issue of vapes and disposable vapes. So please let that encourage you that we can make change, even if it just starts from a tweet, but we can actually make amazing big change when we build a campaign. Sorry that probably did go over, but I wanted to get everything in there. It's so hard to cut anything out because there's so many issues to talk about. But thank you again for having me involved in this session, and I hope you've had a great rest of the talks. Thank you.
Delighted that we were able to share that with you. Many of you will know Laura and the incredible passion that she has and the amazing work that she's done on that particular subject, a real issue for a number of communities. As ever, the passion for this subject is coming through loud and clear on the chat function. It's great to see so many people sharing there. We are up against the clock in terms of questions, but I'm hoping that we can run through at least a couple. And I'm going to suggest maybe running on a little bit longer than 2 o'clock, which I hope will suit some of you. I appreciate some of you will need to go. But I'd like to invite back Mike, Ryan and Louise. And we're going to be posed a few questions from you. So if you can turn back on your cameras and your microphones. And delighted to say I can see Laura has joined us. Well done, Laura. And thanks for providing that pre-record. That was excellent. That really, really helped enormously. So I'm going to be part of this panel session too. So I'm going to hand over to my colleague for one of the first questions.
Thank you, Barry. Suzanne here. Thanks to everyone for sharing their journey in the chat. We've got some amazing comments, and it's worth everyone having a look back at it and just picking out the emails and the links that people have shared. This is what we wanted the conversation to be. It was a start that will just go on from here. So we apologise we won't get through all the questions. We've tried to summarise some of them into groups so that they'll appear in a manifestation of what you've typed. And first off, I'm actually going to go to Barry, because one of the ones that's come up a number of times is about how we deal with working with local authorities, duty bodies who are struggling to meet their legal requirements and the demands of clearing litter when we need to be taking action on such an industrial scale.
Wow, start with the easy one. Thanks, Suzanne. I mean, I think the important thing is that we need to raise this as such an important environmental issue. I mean, there is such focus on some significant environmental areas. We shouldn't not make sure that we make the connection about the issue of litter and pollution where people live, and the more pressure that can be put on politicians, particularly, it's got to be an important part of this. I think it is important, though, to highlight that local government in particular are facing unbelievably difficult challenges, and it would be wrong, I think, not to acknowledge that. Now, that can sound like it's almost dismissing the issue, but I think we have to deal with the world as it is, and we have to work with bring communities together, and as we've demonstrated so well, I think, through this webinar today, where business are engaged in this subject, we can actually make some real traction. And I'm sure with all the community litter picking organisations that are represented today, not least of which Mike and his amazing story from the weekend, that engagement with local authority is a big part of making these things work. And I suspect it's going to be easier for local government in particular to work with communities who are organised, who are demonstrating that this matters to them. So there are huge issues around this, but we need to see it in the context of the world as it is. But I'll be delighted to hear from colleagues on the panel too, what they believe in that.
Would anybody else from the panel like to provide an answer to that one, or we move on to the next question?
Yeah, I'll probably jump straight in on there, just on the back end of that, and just to support what Barry said. I think, one of the statistics was 82% of people in Scotland want action to be taken. So those people that are part of the statistics, what are they actually doing themselves? I think we're very good at looking elsewhere and thinking that litter picking is somebody else's challenge or somebody else's problem. I think it's our own. This is all our planet. And therefore, for me, it's all our responsibility. We can't group things into different areas that, when I go out walking, pushing my pram with my baby and I take a litter picker with me. When my partner was pregnant, heavily pregnant, she was out litter picking. My 2-year-old daughter litter picks. My whole family litter pick. We are taking action, and I think people need to reflect that, and rather than looking at the negativity, look at themselves and think, well, what can I do? Instead of looking at the council all the time. We pay so much for things to get done, but if we all litter pick, then surely that money would go towards something else, which would be more beneficial. So yeah, I would definitely hold the mirror up. That might sound harsh, but people need to look at themselves first and foremost.
Thank you for that, Mike. The next question in is probably one for Lou and Mike, and it's specifically about encouraging volunteers to get involved in their own community and how you might go about that at grassroots. There's a reference in the chat about how difficult it is in sometimes rural areas where there aren't a lot of people to mobilise. So do you have any top tips on getting people out there? I'll go to Louise first.
Well, I have dressed up as Cyril the cigarette, which keeps Scotland beautiful. Heather and Laura will loan it out to you guys as well. It definitely generates some conversations as I walked around town. We are on Facebook and Instagram quite a lot. I know people have talked about working with schools. They're really busy, but the more that you can do with the schools, and we just try and just talk to as many different groups and invite different groups along if we're holding an event. Get in touch with the scouts and the guides and every group that you can think of. So if one of them turns up and they bring a friend the next time, then it can introduce more and more people to it. You will get the people like us who all love litter picking for its own sake, but we've done different things too, like the silent disco that we talked about before. Doing a public art day where we've got chalk. We're going to go around and do CSI pictures around the graffiti on the ground, leaving like notes to say this ends up in the sea. Just as many different ways that you can think of to try and engage with different people. And then, as Mike said, like people do enjoy it more than they think, and they'll come back.
Thank you, Louise. Mike, have you got anything else you'd like to add on that?
I think it's more society normalization. You know, I lean heavily on the mental health side of things because I know that it's one of those things that you can't necessarily relate to until it's discussed, right? And you don't need to necessarily understand everything about mental health, but you do need to understand it's there. And tying that into mental health with the litter picking is you don't necessarily need to know exactly what happens to the litter. You don't necessarily need to know how long things decompose for. You need to know that it is there and it can be removed. And I think, you know, we're all on here for whatever reason, and we all have a degree, a level of knowledge of the process of litter, but just bringing it back to basics. I think then you have a wider forecast of people that you can actually engage with. And then for me, it all goes back to that personality. So when I go out litter picking, I stop and speak to almost everyone and engage with them and ask them what's their reason why, and make it personal to them. As soon as somebody makes something personal, they'll drive a story instead of a movement, and that's what people buy into, you know. And it's the art of storytelling. A lot of my posts on LinkedIn and social media is all storytelling because that's what people enjoy, and be part of it. Be part of an uplifting, empowering story, and that's how I managed to get that message across. Basically.
Thank you very much there, Mike. Right, I'm very conscious of time, but there are two questions here that I'd quite like to be able to pose if people are happy for that. The first one is really a joint one, I think, for Ryan and Barry. We've had a few comments in the chat around the part that corporates and industry play in the whole litter conversation. And I guess the part perhaps for Ryan is how can people engage more positively, I suppose, with the corporates and the businesses in their local area to glean support or at least open the door to conversation. And for Barry, perhaps a little bit about industry playing its part and the legislative requirements around that may be coming. Ryan, I don't know if you want to go first with that.
Yeah, I think from our side, it's how you engage with companies. So we see it all the time with all sorts of different levels, from sponsorship to donations to getting involved in campaigns. I think you need to kind of target the businesses, but every business has the right and has the obligation to go and sort its own problems out. And I think that's part of what we said today. So Decathlon is a big believer that we need to protect our playgrounds, and I think every other company should be the same. So really challenge companies, challenge them in terms of locally in stores, kind of speak to store managers, speak to company owners, and go all the way to corporate as well. So if it's sometimes a case of people not seeing things, other times a case of obviously companies choosing not to see things. So you need to knock on that door really hard sometimes. And yeah, the more companies you do it to, the more change, and the more companies will be forced to change their actions as well.
I'll just come in at the back of that. Yeah, Ryan, I mean, I think it's already been said several times, but the power of consumers is enormous. You know, when sometimes you speak to some fairly senior leaders in either food retail or indeed retail itself, like organisations that Ryan represents, they're absolutely talking about it and thinking about it and understand the impact that consumers deciding that the company doesn't have the right credentials matters. So we shouldn't underestimate that. I think it's important to know that to do the meaningful activity that organisations like us and others, and supporting all the organisations represented here, particularly the community side, that there isn't enough money in the system, and something like extended producer responsibility seeks to address that. Now, that's not a done deal, but I think the spirit of today for me, frankly, has been the huge amount of positivity, the way in which people are approaching this. I think Mike summed it up perfectly, and I'll never forget that, Mike, in terms of if you make it negative, folk don't want to take part. But the solutions are out there. You know, there are packaging solutions that we see quite regularly that are actually really exciting, and I think you can start to see more of that. What matters, and what I think we continually need to do, is to make sure that the consumers know how to recycle or dispose of properly. That's always the issue. I think Laura very eloquently said in our pre-record, you know, we don't have a good track record on recycling, and we can't avoid that. So we can come up with the best system, but we still need to make sure that consumers understand the importance of it and how they can do it. And again, we have many examples in our work on our website, I think, where we're trying to tackle that.
Thank you very much. I'm going to squeeze in one last question, if that's okay. Laura, this one's for you because you've joined us especially after your train journey. And there's been quite a few questions about how to properly dispose of single-use vapes, and you covered on that a little bit in the presentation, but are you able to advise and also share how to do safely? I think the specific question was around whether you can put them in a skip or a bin. So.
Yeah, please do not put them in a skip or a bin. So they have to be recycled as an electrical item. So that is WEE waste, WEEE waste. And vape shops, so for example, VPZ, the bright green one that you might have seen on High Street, they have take back schemes. So you can go in with as many vapes as you want. I've taken in hundreds before and overwhelmed them. And so that's where they have to go. The other places is your local recycling centre will have a WEE waste bin. You can go to Material Focus, which is a recycling electronics charity, and they have a postcode kind of locator, so you can put your postcode in and find out where nearby. But they are a huge fire risk. So yeah, please don't put them in your bin, in any normal recycling, and don't put them in a battery bin because it's a different type of battery. So it needs to be recycled as a waste electronic item, and you can find where that is if it's your recycling centre or a vape shop. Or I would just say you can also push places to get them. So I managed to get my university to put in some. So you can also just ask your workplace or any other buildings if they could put them in if you know that they're a bit of a problem. So.
Thank you very much for that, Laura. We have got a number of other questions covering issues like single-use packaging, cups, dog fouling, sewage-related litter. I think probably we don't have the time to go on to those, but what I would say is that a number of those topics are covered on our website, and if you have a look, there's a number of reports, resources, and materials that you can download and use. We're more than happy to take any of the questions we haven't answered directly. We will go through those in the chat and where we can get back to people, but please do get in touch with us at cleanup@keepscotlandbeautiful.org, and we will pick up any questions or pass them on to the speakers. I'm going to hand you back to Barry just to wrap up. Thank you.
Thanks, Suzanne, and thanks to the team behind the scenes for keeping us on track with the questions. It's incredibly helpful. I'm acutely aware of time, and we're way over, and I think that just demonstrates the passion that's been on this webinar and the contributions that have been made by everybody. So it's a huge thanks from me to Ryan, to Louise, to Mike, and indeed to Laura. So thank you for joining us for this fantastic session. We clearly need to run something similar again. It's been such a powerful webinar in terms of the stories that you're bringing and the impact that you're making, but clearly the huge passion expressed in the chat box demonstrates that we need to do more of these sessions to keep everyone engaged. My conclusion here runs to 2 pages, so you'll be delighted. I'm not going to go through absolutely, but there are a couple of things I think are really important to cover. One is our forthcoming annual spring clean, which will start on the 15th of March and running for a month. Last year we had over 32,000 people taking part, huge numbers. But I'm looking at everyone who's still got their camera on. We know that we can do more, and we know we can mobilize even more people to get involved. And I have to say, delighted to say one of the key growth areas in that space, Ryan, was indeed the private sector and lots of organisations wanting to take part and support their employees to get engaged. We're running a friendly competition. I'll say that again. We're running a friendly competition and seeing if we can celebrate which local authority area, so that's not just local authority activity, but within a local authority area can collect the most. So I'm looking at you, Dundee, Laura. I'm looking at you, East Lothian, Louise, to see who can collect the most, and let's see if we can really make that difference. To a huge thanks to all the speakers and for you for joining us. You can learn more, as we've said, you can learn more about all the activity that we've done, we're engaged in, and it really is quite an extensive list on our website. So please do visit our website. Our next conversation it will be on the 30th of April, and delighted to say it'll be a conversation about biodiversity, a key area for Keep Scotland Beautiful, particularly in our refresh strategy. And I know we're looking forward to that. These national conversations so far have been incredible, and I've absolutely no doubt the one in April will be exactly the same. So I'd like to thank you sincerely for bearing with us and sticking with us. It's great to see so many people still here, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. So thank you very much for joining us.